Israel and Turkey are about to collide over Syria. Israel just bombed a Syrian airbase, but the real target, it wasn't Syria. I think it was Turkey. On August 18th, Israeli aircraft struck the Abu al-Duhur base in northwestern Syria. Israel says it acted because Syria was preparing to allow Turkish forces to deploy there. Turkey says that claim is false, and Syria says there were no plans to turn that site into a permanent Turkish military base. A quick favor, I'm trying to get this channel to 5,000 subscribers as quick as possible. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Now let's get back to it. This isn't really a story about an airbase. It's about what happens when two of the most powerful militaries in the Middle East begin competing for influence inside the same country. Since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, Turkey has become one of the most important powers outside of Syria, and Israel is increasingly worried about what that could mean. So why does Turkey care so much about Syria? Let's start with geography. Turkey shares roughly 550 miles of border with Syria. For Ankara, instability in Syria doesn't stay in Syria. Turkey spent more than a decade dealing with millions of refugees, militant groups near its border, and Kurdish forces controlling their territory in northern Syria. That last issue is particularly important. Turkey views some Syrian Kurdish forces as closely connected to the PKK, a Kurdish militant organization that has fought the Turkish state for decades. So Turkey has repeatedly intervened in northern Syria to prevent a powerful Kurdish-controlled region from developing along its border. But the fall of Assad gave Turkey a much bigger opportunity. Instead of simply managing instability, Ankara can now help shape the government replacing him. Turkey has become an important partner of President Ahmad al-Shaara's government. It's helping train Syrian forces, providing diplomatic support, and helping rebuild institutions. Hell, from Turkey's perspective, a stable and friendly Syria could mean fewer refugees, more trade, and a more secure border, while having less Kurdish militant groups in the area. There's also something bigger at stake: influence. For decades, Syria was closely tied to Iran and Russia. Iran used Syria as a route toward Hezbollah and Lebanon. Russia maintained major military bases and helped keep Assad in power. Now, Assad's fall has weakened Iran dramatically and changed Russia's position. That's created an opening for Turkey to become one of the dominant outside powers in Syria. And that's where Ankara begins colliding with Israel. Now, why is Israel worried? Well, Israel doesn't necessarily believe Turkey is preparing to attack it. The real issue is Israel's freedom to operate inside Syria. For years, Israeli aircraft have struck Iranian weapons shipments, Hezbollah infrastructure, air defenses, and other military targets inside Syria. But imagine a future Syria with Turkish radar, Turkish air defenses, Turkish drones, Turkish aircraft, and Turkish soldiers operating from Syrian bases. Suddenly, every Israeli mission becomes more complicated. Israel would no longer simply be dealing with the weakened Syrian military. Its aircraft could potentially be operating near the forces of a NATO country, and one mistake could escalate very quickly. Imagine Israel attacks a Syrian military facility and Turkish soldiers are killed. Turkey retaliates. Israel responds. Neither side planned a war, but suddenly both governments are under pressure to respond. That's why the United States is working on ways to prevent accidental clashes between Israel, Turkey, and Syria. Then there's also a deeper strategic disagreement. Turkey wants to help rebuild a stronger Syrian state capable of controlling its territory. Israel may want Syria stable, but it does not necessarily want a powerful Syrian army capable of limiting Israeli operations or threatening Israel's northern border. From Israel's perspective, certain kinds of military rebuilding could create a new threat, and relations between Turkey and Israel are already extremely tense, particularly in the war in Gaza. So neither side is looking at the other's actions with much trust. Now, Turkey and Israel, they aren't alone. Assad's collapse changed the geopolitical map of the entire region. Russia, of course, still wants to preserve some of its military presence, particularly its access to the bases that connect Moscow to the Mediterranean and Africa. Iran has lost much of its influence it once had through Syria. That is a major strategic gain for Israel. The Gulf states, they increasingly see Syria as an economic opportunity. The country needs enormous investment in electricity, roads, housing, industry, and infrastructure. Whoever helps rebuild Syria could gain significant political influence, and the United States is trying to keep all of this competing interests from creating another war. For years, the central question was whether Assad could survive. Well, now that question is over. The next question, who shapes the Syria that replaces him? Turkey wants security and influence along its southern border. Israel wants to prevent Syria from becoming a serious military threat. Russia wants to preserve whatever influence it. The Gulf states see economic opportunity, and the United States is just trying to prevent another war, I think. The Syrian civil war may have changed dramatically, but the competition over Syria, it certainly hasn't ended. Could Turkey and Israel actually fight? Well, probably not intentionally. A direct war would be extremely costly for both. Turkey has one of NATO's largest militaries. Israel has one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the region, and both have important relationships with the US. Nobody has much to gain from a major confrontation. The real danger is miscalculation. Military forces operating near each other, unclear red lines, airstrikes without enough warning, one side misunderstanding what the other side is doing. That's what makes the attack on Abu al-Duhad important. Not because Turkey and Israel are inevitably heading towards war. They're not. It matters because Syria's strategic map has changed. For years, Israel's primary concern inside Syria was Iran. Today, Iran is weaker. Assad is gone. Russia's position has changed. And Turkey is becoming one of the country's most influential outside powers. Turkey wants a stronger Syrian state closely connected to Ankara. Israel wants to make sure that stronger state never becomes a threat or prevents Israel from defending itself. Those goals can coexist, but only up to a point. And that's probably the biggest story in all of this. This isn't really about one Syrian airbase. It's about who trains Syria's military, who rebuilds its economy, who controls its alliances, and which foreign powers are allowed to operate there. For more than a decade, Syria was a battlefield in a civil war. Now it may be becoming a battlefield for regional influence. Neither Turkey nor Israel appear to want a war, but both believe Syria matters to their security. And when two powerful countries believe their security depends on the same piece of territory, the biggest danger isn't necessarily that either side wants a fight. It's what happens when one of them makes a mistake. Hey, this is Frank with America's Geopolitics. If you like what you heard, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.